Welcome to the Birth Neoterist space with your host, Sabia Wade. Fun fact, my middle name is Kashmir, for those who are wondering, but I'm Black, so it's not like spelled regular. It's Cashmir with an apostrophe, because Black people love adding an apostrophe. So anyway, I'm here with my special guest, Jeff, and we have decided prior to in our prep session that we're going to get into the shits today. So I'm very excited. Jeff, introduce yourself. Take it away.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jeff Main. My middle name is Daniel, and my
Yes.
pronouns are he, him. I'm the co-founder and executive director of Point of Pride, which is a 501c3 nonprofit organization that serves the international trans community, specifically in helping them access gender-affirming health and wellness services. And thank you so much for being here. Super excited for this conversation.
Thank you for being here, especially like give me the prep, like, we're going to have a good time. I'm like, oh, yeah, bet, let's do it. Okay. So let's talk about Point of Pride first. So
Sure.
when was Point of Pride created? And what was your initial thought? Because I feel like sometimes like when we create organizations, usually it comes to like, I'm gonna do this thing. And then before you know, you're like, oh, it's this thing. So
Right.
I'd love to think about like what was your like initial like building of your baby?
Yeah, so that we're gonna do this thing, it becomes this thing is
Yeah.
our story. So we get our roots. We officially incorporated as a nonprofit in 2016, but our roots actually go back to 2011. My friend and co-founder of the organization, Aidan Dowling, was looking to finance his own top surgery, and so to do that, he was selling screen printed T-shirts. It's a model that a lot of trans folks or even
Hmm.
just folks in general are doing to crowdsource and be able to afford care. He really was innovative at that time when he launched this. So he called his company Point 0.5cc. At first, he just wanted to raise money for his own surgery. And once he was able to get care and firsthand experience the impact that it had on him, he said, I really want to keep this going and I want to reinvest it back into the community. So it started as a screen printing apparel company in his garage, and a portion of every sale would go into a community pot that ultimately gave grants to trans folks so that they could receive gender affirming care. The model was really successful, but we quickly realized that a small apparel company is not quite, well suited to meet a
Hmm.
very, very clear and rising demand from trans folks for the care that they need and deserve. So we started talking about pivoting and creating a sibling nonprofit organization. And so that's what we did in 2016. When we first started, we had this annual trans surgery fund, which is still one of our trademark support programs to this day. It's a scholarship-like program that gives folks financial aid towards any gender affirming procedure that they need. We also distributed free chest binders, which we used to mail discreetly with T-shirts, so that folks that maybe it wasn't safe for them to access or couldn't afford it would be able to have access to those garments. Since then, we've added some other programs and services. We have a femme shapewear program, which provides tucking gaffs to folks on the feminine spectrum. And we also have scholarship-like programs for permanent hair removal services and HRT, hormone replacement therapy access. So to date, we've distributed more than 17,000 garments to folks in all 50 states and 100 countries and counting. And we've awarded just shy of $1 million across all of our financial aid programs.
That's wild.
Yeah, and it is wild, and something that is a real something that has been really inspirational for me to be a part of this this organization, but also to work with a really talented team of individuals, is the fact that up until January, we were entirely volunteer operated. So my
Mm,
backstory, while I was working as a volunteer on the board of Point of Pride, I was also working at a marketing agency full time. And that's true of everybody really that's been on the
mhm.
team up until this year. So super, super grateful to be able to do this work and work with a team that is so passionate about affecting like real change, and then also see that impact on members of our community.
For sure. Cause like I'm looking at, right? I was looking at your website and I was looking at all the different like aspects of care, right?
Mhm.
And I think like that's something that like sometimes is missed, especially if you're not necessarily a part of the community. It's like understanding that like, at least from my understanding, right? So I don't identify as trans, but I think in general, everyone is holistic in like in how they express themselves and who they are. And so one of the things that I see like with the services that you provide, that is like a holistic experience,
Mhm.
right? It's not like here's I mean, every part of it is important, right? But it's like it's how you feel on the inside, it's how you look on the outside, how you want to express yourself on the outside. It's the community you have around, your identity and being able to talk to people that have a shared identity. Like I think it's just like a holistic experience. And that's what I really enjoy about the organization is seeing like these different pieces that touch on these different parts of ourselves that are all very important, but I think sometimes are fragmented, if that makes
Mhm.
sense.
Yeah, no,
So I don't know, I just see the, like, holistic approach to it.
yeah, no, I think that does make sense, and I think as trans people, like, every person's journey is very different. That's true of all people. But when it comes to
Mhm.
transition and what is really most impactful in a person's life and what they need to be able to navigate the world more authentically, but oftentimes more safely, might look very different from person to person. And so, a great example of the work that we're doing right now is talking to folks in the community and outside of it about the importance of permanent hair removal services. Like for trans women of color, this is not just a cosmetic thing, even though it's often deemed that way.
Yep,
This
mhm.
is this is in a very important step in employment access, in just general safety in the classroom, in the workplace, in public, and so really trying to dispel any myths about that while also providing that direct service to folks. I think speaks a little bit to that try
Yeah,
to be
like, that's
holistic and
important.
yeah,
Like, it's
yeah.
not just, like and that's what I mean, like, I think some people can see, like, they're like, "Okay, someone gets on" they finally get their life-affirming medication, like their hormones or whatever, right? And they're like, "Okay, cool," and I'm like, "That's a part of it."
Right.
Right? But also there may be other pieces that are just as important to make this person feel whole,
Totally.
right? And they're in their transition and in their in themselves. And even in this other aspect, which I think is really sweet, is like the writing letters, right? Like the reminders, right? It's one thing to receive like, something that you need, like body shaping or whatever, but it's like also just to feel to have a letter of like affirmation of like reminders of like you are appreciated, you are valued, like this is like we're here with you in this aspect, especially for people like you said, like being that y'all have been in like all 50 states, 100 countries, like I'm usually living in a place where there is some type of variety of people, right?
Mhm.
Like
Yeah.
right now, right? I'm in Georgia, I'm in Atlanta. So there's like, there's like a variety of people. And then like I've also lived in San Diego. I used to live in Philly. I'm from Jersey. So I've always lived in populations where like I see some expression of myself or some expression of queerness or transness. And like imagine people that don't have that, right?
Right.
Where they're like the only trans person that they know, and they're the only person who's transitioning. And it's like, it's one thing, yes, like I said, to get those like life affirming medications and things like that, but also like a fucking card that says you matter.
Yeah. Yeah, with every free chest binder or femme shaper garment that we send out, we always include a note of support. And we regularly hear from the people that we serve that like these notes have just as much of an impact, if not more, than the actual thing, right? The garment or whatever support they need. Because they just feel seen. And it's a moment where they can feel validated from a total stranger, regardless of what's going on in their lives.
Mhm.
We're regularly told that like people are crying happy tears when they see that someone took the time to really affirm them in this note. And the folks that write these notes, um, we've partnered with company ERGs or school GSAs or even just members of religious communities, any type of community organization to get together and have a letter writing campaign. And it's a great opportunity for a facilitator to talk about trans issues and topics and just educate people while also providing these letters that directly help trans youth and adults that really need that support. So
For
it's been
sure.
it's just been such a great program and something our organization is so proud of, that we can offer this to
And
folks.
should be. And I think like, to like also bring this into the broader like state of what we're in right now.
Yeah.
And like, obviously I am not obviously, but I'm maybe not. Like, I think I'm obviously gay, right? But you know how you think something's obvious, but it's not obvious to other people, and you're like, "You can't feel it in my energy?" Like, it's giving gay,
I
you
mean,
know?
I feel like I'm obviously trans, but then when I'm like not clocked, I don't know what to do with that.
Yeah, you're like, "What should I do? How do I feel?" Right? But, like but, like, so one of the things that, like, is happening or many of the things that is happening right now is that there's truly, 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 like, a genocide happening when it comes to the queer community for sure, right? But also specifically the trans community, right? And I really wanna be specific to that topic. And, like, I was just telling you, like, my partner lives in Florida, and Florida is, like, one of the worst fucking states to
Yeah.
be in, especially if you're trans. And like, but it's not the only state that is moving through a bunch of bullshit, right? And so like I'm thinking about, of course, like the work that you all are doing with providing this holistic care, this affirming people's existence, right? But I'm also thinking about like how does this current state that we're in, state of war, feels like that we're in also impact the work that you're doing,
Yeah,
right? Where like in some places it's becoming very scary to be trans, to
absolutely.
identify as trans, to be clocked as trans, right? Like
Yeah.
just wondering how that's impacting you, impacting the work, like how is that showing up?
Yeah. So how it's impacting me as an individual and the other staff and board members, so many other activists in this space have said it. It's just tiring. You can feel so exhausted just from the mental load of seeing yet another proposed bill. I mean, I think by last count, there were over 500 bills in 48 states that specifically target LGBTQ plus people in some way, oftentimes to restrict trans rights.
Mhm.
So it is exhausting, and I really try to, what does Mr. Rogers say? Look for the helpers, right? I really
Yeah.
try to like focus on those bright spots of like really beautiful stories of mutual aid coming out of the community. Erin Reed is a fantastic journalist right now who is tracking all of the different anti-trans legislation bills. And from that, I have seen conversations on social media and other spaces of like just people helping people relocate. We get a lot of emails from folks saying, I need to leave Florida or Texas or Kentucky or wherever. I don't have the means, help. And so I think there's
Mhm.
a lot of organizations, but also individuals that are really coming together. And it's tough that that's the way that it has to be, but it's also a beautiful story of resilience. So I try to hold on to that. But how all of the legislation is impacting our work too, being that we serve all 50 states, it's sort of put us on our back foot. We have to be super reactive. We have to track these bills and understand what the implications are on the people that we serve or any potential liabilities on us. Some of these bills are written in such a way that um, even just affirming someone questioning their identity, so not even providing direct health care, but
Mhm.
providing links to other resources could be
Mhm.
considered a misdemeanor or felony. And so that really limits our ability to meet people where they're at and provide that
Yeah.
holistic care that we want to. It's also really difficult because a lot of times the families of trans kids and adults will come to us seeking help and resources. So even if we want to help someone that's in a supportive environment with supportive loved ones in their lives, if they happen to live in a certain state, we don't know if we can. It's been really challenging, and so we're trying to deepen our relationships with like local chapters of the ACLU, local LGBTQ rights organizations who
Mhm.
are able to like better track these bills and better understand them and help us with our own decision making. But like, it's been tough. it's
Yeah,
it's
it's so
really
tough.
tough.
And I think like it's one of those things, at least for me, like, you know, as a person, right, who's a part of the LGBTQIA plus community, like it's been of course like when you were saying like the whole like finding I know that like our community will move the way that we need to move because we've always moved the way that we
Right.
needed to move, right? Like, the rights that we have not now have not always been available, right? Like so we've always been doing what we need to do for our community, but it's also exhausting to have to continue to do that. It's like why do I have to fight for like me to just be myself or for my community member to be themselves or like like why is this so, why are you so bothered? Like it just like it's like what is the big deal? So I think like it's exhausting. It's beautiful to see the ways that we always, we're resilient and we do what we do, but it's also like, man, if we like just could have what we needed to have, we could focus on bigger issues. You know what I mean? Like we
Yeah.
could focus on other issues, like,
Yeah.
and it's like, so it's like it's always that push and pull of like we gain rights and then we lose them, and then we gain them and then we have to, and then we have, you know what I mean? Like it's like we can't even get to, you know, this point of just like medical care that is also liberating and consistent.
Mhm.
Like resources that are well resourced, like because also the resources, right? Like you're saying, like your organization was a lot of volunteer based work, right? And it's like so many things that especially people in our community are doing for our community and not getting paid,
Right.
and also having to do other jobs and also having to do these things. It's just like a lot. So I just want to like name like that exhaustion that comes into doing this work, even when you do find the beautiful pieces
Right.
about it.
Yeah, it's been such a reminder that like progress is not linear and that you've got to keep fighting to maintain that the ground that you have, and um yeah, I think that was a really good call out to emphasize to so many activists and journalists and folks that are in the community that are doing this important work are not compensated. They're doing it because we need to do the work as a community to survive. And that's on
Hmm.
top of family life and other jobs and other responsibilities.
For sure. And I think like, the word that like really comes through, right? It's like we're obviously fighting for our liberation and like that ongoing work. But one of the words that we named before is like our autonomy,
Mhm.
right? Our ability to do what we want to do with ourselves for our health, for our well-being, with like, so I would just love to like hear from you right now, what does autonomy mean to you?
Yeah, yeah, like so autonomy to me, especially in the terms of gender affirming care, but there's so much overlap, like we were
Hmm.
talking about with reproductive justice. It's about self-determination. So saying that trans people are the ones that are best equipped to make informed choices about our healthcare needs, about our bodies, about our lives, and that all people, not just trans people, but all people should be entrusted to be able to make these informed decisions with their families or their loved ones or their healthcare
Hmm.
providers. But they themselves should be able to make these decisions without intervention from politicians. And so I think that's where like the most apparent overlap is for me when we talk about reproductive justice and trans justice is that it really is, it boils down right to this principle of autonomy and self-determination that all
For
people should
sure.
be entitled to.
And to me, like, correct me if I'm wrong, this is my opinion, right? But I feel like, at least for me, and maybe this is all maybe got me into some hot spots as far as like the birth world, but like to me, trans justice is reproductive justice. Cause I'm
Yes.
just like the ability, like when we think about like the definition, right, of reproductive justice, like the ability to have children, to not have children, to parent those children in a safe community. Safe means that it has to be safe for trans people as well.
Hmm.
Like that, like to have children is also a choice that trans people are making. To not have children is also a choice that trans people are making, right? Trans people are utilizing fertility, they're utilizing abortion, they're having babies, they're like there's no,
Hmm.
you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like
no, I agree. And we, on our side too, we often equate, as I'm sure you might agree, that like we're also talking about disability justice and we're talking about all of these other
safe,
intersectional
safety.
things, right? Yeah. Um,
Hmm.
and there are, right, there's so many different marginalized communities right now that are having their voices and their options limited, and their basic abilities to express themselves or get their needs met is just taken away. And so it really is like a large conversation with just so many moving parts. And you can't talk about one marginalized community without also engaging and
Hmm.
understanding others.
For sure. And I think like, and another thing I want to name too is like a lot of times, so one of the things I talk about like in my book, Birth and Liberation and Whoop De Woo, is like there's always this like separation, right? Even of any type of group. It's like your hair is red, your hair is brunette, your hair like whatever, right? But I'm like, if we're talking about, the redheads not having to be blonde and their like choice to stay red, like the people who are brunette and whatever have to be in that conversation as well,
Yeah.
right? So it can't be like trans people are the only ones fighting for trans justice and trans rights. Because when we think about that, like, we talk about abortion, right? Like abortion is something that we've obviously see go backwards in the last year specifically. I try to tell people like it's not just about the people that get abortion should be fighting for this, because if someone can lose their rights and their autonomy and their ability to make choices, that means that you can too. Right? There's
Yeah.
only a matter of time before we get to whatever that next subject is. Okay, we dealt with abortion, we got that fucked up. Okay, cool. Let's go back to the queer and trans community. Let's try to move that away, right? And then
Right.
let's get back from that, especially in Florida. Now let's get to the Black people, right?
Yeah.
Like now
Yeah.
let's right. So it's like there's nothing like we have to understand that like when we're talking about trans rights specifically, you don't have to be trans to be talking about trans rights, to be
Right.
standing up for doing the work or saying the things like when you're talking about trans rights, you're also talking about your rights.
Yep. You're
Like
talking about your rights, and it's also a conversation about like what kind of world do you want to live in? Like do you want to live in a society that like is equitable and allows for progress, or do you want to move backwards? And unfortunately, I think that there's a good number of Americans, right, that would choose option two. But I mean, yeah, I you hit the nail. Like Florida is certainly a concern, I think, on everyone's minds with just the vast array of legislation that's come out. My wife is an educator, and she's often talked about like, I don't think I could teach my classes in Florida. Like, I don't think I'd be allowed. Some of the
no.
books on my reading list, like I couldn't, couldn't put out on my syllabus. But
Oh
yeah,
my gosh, let me tell you. So my partner, right, works at a company. I'm not going to say the company's name because we don't get paid. Okay, they're not sponsoring nothing over here, and they're not going to want to. You know what I'm saying? But anyway, so she was like, they have like every company, especially 2020, was like, we're gonna do DEI everything, do. And so at one point, she went to like do a training, and I don't know what the answer to this is, but I just think it's so like interesting, right? So it was a DEI training, go through the training, whatever corporate shit you do, and it wasn't there anymore.
mm,
And so she was like, and I was like, and we're like, well, why is it not there? Because everything else is there. And then she was like, wait, I'm in Florida. I don't know if they can even teach this anymore.
yeah,
And I was like, like,
yeah,
like you're in Florida where they don't want you to talk about certain things, like for real. Right. And like I'm just thinking about that in the sense of like that's only one example, right? Like that's not talking about like you said with your wife, an educational system. That's not talking about like, like how we raise our children, because our children are the future, period. Right. So like
yeah,
I don't know, it's just like, and when we talk about that when it comes to LGBTQIA issues and when it comes to whatever, it's like literally this lack of autonomy to fucking learn what you want to learn or what you
yeah,
need to learn because it's just history. Like it's not even you're trying to create some shit. This is just the shit that really happened.
yeah. It's the restriction on information is probably like, for me on a personal level, that's probably the thing that is just like the hardest pill to swallow. Because when I was growing up and like, first exploring, I thought maybe I was a lesbian. I never had the terminology. There was no information or resources for me to access to understand who I was, or
Mm-hmm.
even just connect with other people who were like me to figure things out. And I think that, I it was and continues to be beautiful for me to see younger kids just not have this sort of baggage and have the ability to explore gender or talk about it with their friends and be accepted and validated for who they are. And so to see places like Florida that like literally just want to scrub this information out, it's like, man, we're setting up another wave, another generation
Mm-hmm.
that has to like needlessly feel isolated, and it's just yeah, that's been the thing that just gets me
And I'm just like,
angry
for
is
me, I get infuriated because I'm like, how can we not talk about someone that exists? Like, I
yeah,
don't like, how can we not like this person exists, this group of people exist. Like, how do we just not talk? We're not making up something. We're not like, here's an imaginary thing that we're trans people have been here forever. Queer
Yeah.
people have been here forever. They're in history. They've created half of the fucking world, if not more. Like, how do we not like talk about people that exist?
Right. At the very least, recognize that, and there, I think I saw a headline about, a book being pulled because it casually mentioned that someone from history was lesbian. I can't remember the title, but it
Mm-hmm.
was like a casual mention in a kid's book, not an instructive manual on how to be gay. Right. And it was just
Yeah.
like, just an acknowledgement of the fact that she had a partner. And it was like that book was removed. And yeah, it's really sad and it's really scary.
So how do you see the future, right, of like your organization? How do you see it moving forward in this current state of people aiming to shift people's autonomy or give them less autonomy? People aiming to, you know, act like people don't exist or not talking about certain things like these limits, right, that come with this work. And I also want to name too, before we even go into that, is I hope like you also recognize this part about your work, but I always say people who are in this work who are doing reproductive, human rights, gender affirming care are always taking a risk, right? Even if you're like, oh, this organization is giving out chest binders, that's not the same as the person who's doing underground abortions, right? Like, obviously, that's two different things, but it still comes at a risk. Like, there's always, right, like you're putting yourself out there, right, as a person who can be ridiculed, who can be, the technology these days is wild. So like who can be, like you're also putting yourself out there doing this work. You're also providing care to people, and that care is becoming very risky,
Mhm.
right? Even if it feels like it's low risk because maybe you're not doing medical care or whatever the case is, it's still risky. There's still, like you said, misdemeanors that are possible. There's still all kind of things possible. So I just want to name that like this work at every level comes with a risk,
Mhm.
especially when you are someone who identifies with the community that you are organizing for.
Yeah. Yeah, the language that we've seen in some of these bills is like if you aid and abet, a trans person in accessing care or information, and so even though, to your point, we're not the doctors, we're not the healthcare professionals that are administering treatments or, performing procedures, we're giving them the financial access to be able to do that through these scholarships. So there is a good amount of risk, and we do spend a considerable amount of time thinking about how to mitigate that risk. And there's really no good answers because we're in this ever-changing landscape, and we don't know politically what 2024 is going to hold, though we expect it to be pretty bad. We expect that these bills are just going to continue, perhaps both in volume but also in scope. Right now, a lot of these healthcare bills are specifically targeting minors under the age of 18.
Mhm.
We've seen some bills, I want to say Oklahoma, I think goes up to 26. But we expect that they'll just either directly or functionally make healthcare access inaccessible for adults too. Um, Similar to tactics that they've done to restrict abortion, where like maybe you're not outlawing abortion, but you're making it so difficult for people to get it that functionally you are, right?
Yeah, and
Um,
also even with that, right? Like, for example, abortion medication that is used because it's restricted on the abortion access side, it also restricts it for fertility and other uses, right? And
right.
I think that's also what's happening, that there's like a manipulation
Mhm.
around like, well, if we can't use this over here, then you can't use this over here. And I feel like that's also something that's happening in the trans community, whereas
Mhm.
like we won't make it like outlaw outright.
Yeah.
But you said like we'll make it so difficult that it'll damn near be inaccessible.
Sure. I mean, most hormone replacement therapy right now is prescribed by medical practitioners. And I think Florida passed a bill, or is still considering a bill,
Mhm.
that says you have to get your testosterone or estrogen from a medical licensed doctor. And there's other restrictions involved there.
Mhm.
But functionally, for people that live in like more remote or rural areas of the country, laws like that make it impossible. Then there's telehealth restrictions. You might not be able to get
Yep.
testosterone mailed to your door. So it's just, yeah, we see that same playbook repeating itself right now with trans healthcare. And so, yeah, the future, unfortunately, looks like constantly reassessing our programs and services and trying to understand, okay, what region of the country is most at risk right now? When are these bills going into effect? What are the implications? Something that we've done in the past is we've actually expedited support to people who are on our waiting lists from
Hmm.
Texas or
Different,
some of these
yeah.
other areas. Yeah, and it said, okay, we're going to bump them to the top of the list, get them what they need before a rule takes effect. Which is it's a tough pivot, but trying to serve our community as best we can, in an equitable
Mhm.
way is just one of our pillars.
Is one of the things. I mean, like right now, I was just talking to Choice, which is or abortion like telehealth community, but they're doing like where you can get a lot of certain amount of pills ahead of time for if you need them,
Mhm.
right? Because we also know that laws will probably become more difficult to obtain, especially telehealth. So it was like, can we get you a good amount the next year and a half, whatever, 2 years or whatever, so that you can have this medication in case, right? And I'm like, hopefully that's happening in the communities, but with testosterone, like, can we give you more than what you need, or can we do this a
Right.
certain way so that if things do shift and there is going to be a delay and when you can get this or how you can get it, you have something, right? Like, it's just, it's pretty wild.
Yeah,
It's
we're
pretty
hearing
wild.
stories, especially like trans women are sometimes more able to stockpile
For
medications. It's
sure.
harder with testosterone being
Hmm.
restricted. We'd love to see that restriction go away, but who knows? So yeah,
Hmm.
it's been really tough, and certainly there are people going, gray market, black market for hormones, which then opens up a whole other layer of complexity, right? About knowing like the quality of the drugs and safety and all of that stuff. So yeah, it's messy. It's pretty
It
tough.
is. I think we both can agree on though, like the future is still going to be queer and trans.
Oh yeah.
Like we're still gonna be here. Like
Yeah.
that's not gonna change, right? And I think we both can agree on like we through it all, we're gonna be exhausted. We're
Yeah.
gonna whatever, but we will, you know, do what we have to do. We will be resilient. We will continue to help our communities, right? But like I guess my question to you is like how do people support the work that you're doing? What is the best way to support?
Yeah. Yeah. So of course, donations are always gratefully appreciated, right? So you can make a donation on our website, pointofpride.org. Just $3 covers the cost to ship a chest finder or a shapewear garment to someone living in the United States. So for the cost of a cup of coffee, right? You
Hmm.
could mail a garment to someone who needs it. But we had also talked in this call about writing letters, and I think that's a great way that folks could get involved and support folks, support trans folks, and really see them and validate them where they're at. So check out our website for more information on how you can do that. It's a really creative and fun opportunity.
I
But
love the
secondly,
letters. I
yeah,
know why I'm so touched by the letters. I love the letters, but yeah.
they're really, and some people just get like so creative with them, and make these beautiful works of art that I almost want to like frame it, and I hope the recipient does, when they get it. But yeah, but I think that really it's just allyship, for folks that feel passionate about the issues that we're talking about, and I hope everyone does, right? It's talking to politicians and making phone calls, raising your hand and making your voice heard. There's an organization called the Transformations Project, that, like the journalist I had mentioned earlier, is tracking all of these bills, and they'll actually provide you with, hey, here's the phone number of who to call.
Mhm.
Here's the language of what to say when you get that staffer or that voicemail. Doesn't matter if you live in the state or out of the state, like you can still register your voice. And when I've done that, I've often worried, like, am I really creating any
Yeah.
change? Like, is anyone listening to this voicemail, or is it just like, going straight to a trash can? But we found through this work that it really does make a difference. Like, even if a politician just gets like half a dozen messages on a topic, they'll be like, oh, the constituents are caring about this. I should look
Mhm.
into this. And so I think that sort of, really getting involved on a political level in your communities, understanding what your politicians are up to and not being scared to like call them out on stuff is probably the most important thing you could do now and into next year, where we expect hundreds more of these
Next
bills.
year is gonna be a
Yeah.
mess, child. It's gonna it's gonna be a mess.
Yeah. Yeah.
I need to start like I need to start preparing because I think like the pandemic, like obviously President Biden came in when he came in, but also like the pandemic was happening. It was so many things.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, oh shit, we're about to get back into an election year. Like it's about to be
Yeah.
it's already so much bullshit happening. You know what I mean? Like it's just
Right.
prepping us for what's to come in this next year. So it's a lot of work for us to do, but it's not impossible.
It's not. No, we're going to see politicians try to one up each other on, this crusade against woke culture, right?
Hmm.
And so we know that that's coming. And so to your point, it gives us a little time through our exhaustion to prepare and decide like, how are we going to support the LGBTQ folks in our lives directly? Like, how are we going to show up for them and help them with their exhaustion and burnout, and just make sure that, we're all prioritizing our self-care as much as we can. And then more broadly, like, how can we affect change, get involved, show up to protests, contact politicians, write letters, that sort of work.
Hmm.
That really does, make a huge difference.
And I will also say, just to add this in, we have a couple more minutes, but I will also say we're gonna have to listen to these Gen Zers, these whoever's behind that, 'cause they don't play. And I
No.
keep telling people, like, I think the millennials, don't get us wrong, we millennials or whatever we are, we brought it in.
Hmm.
We set the foundation a bit more. We're more like, I don't give a fuck, this is what you're gonna get, okay?
Yeah.
But these like Gen Z, they don't play. So
Millennials
like
walked so that Gen Z could run, right?
exactly, and they are running,
Yeah.
right? So I think also like using that young, youthful energy
Hmm.
like, and really paying attention to the work that they're doing because they're also doing a lot of great fucking shit.
Yeah, and
Um,
we didn't even talk about like climate
mhm,
justice, right? But everything, all of these different important justice topics all come together, and I think Gen Z, to your point, is like really tuned in on these things and thinking about, the long-term future. Like, I worry when I think about the future, if I think too much just about climate justice or reproductive access or things like that, to
mhm.
face it all at once might feel overwhelming. But I think that, like, yeah, Gen Z just has their eye on the prize, and they're really politically minded, and they're really not afraid to speak up about the issues that they care about.
For real, I love it. I love it. I'm
Yeah.
like, yes, because like now that we're like in our 30s, me and you are the same age. I'm like, I don't have that energy like I used to have.
My knees hurt,
Okay,
yeah.
my knees hurt. My girlfriend's hips are popping. Like, like we got things going on, but I think also like in our 30s, because we are more grounded, we have the ability to do like the planning of the longer projects, the finding of the resources, like, all works together.
Yeah.
So just like aiming to put all those things together, because that's really going to get us to this through into the next step that we're moving towards.
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
have one last question for you.
I'm ready.
My last question is, through all of this, how are you taking care of yourself?
Mm. So, great question. Uh, I am also the parent of a very rambunctious toddler right now. She's 2.5. So
Oh
between
yeah, that's a spicy age, yes.
between the pandemic and my work with Point of Pride and, being a dad,
Mhm,
it's hard to find that time. But I do try to squeeze in things like running, playing guitar,
mhm,
things like that just sort of allow me to either channel like some sort of a movement or creative space and
for
just
sure.
zen out. I was never one for meditation, and so I find like running or lifting weights or playing guitar to be like meditative. So
Yeah, for sure.
I try
Meditation
to,
is whatever you need it to be,
right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I can't
for
sit still
sure.
and just clear my head. I've got to be doing something. So I found like being active but not productive is something I've had to really like train
Mhm,
myself to do, especially this last year. I'm definitely
mhm.
guilty of like if you're not productive, like, you can't rest, or like while I'm resting, I'm like thinking of all the things I should be doing.
Yeah,
Uh,
I'm the same way. Like I have to like I don't have to be like I've learned like even through therapy, like because I'm like I'm not the person that can just chill all the time. Like my brain is always going.
yeah,
So it's like I have to find something to like write or like a couple weeks ago my anxiety was super high. So I bought like one of my knitting looms again because I have to be productive in something, but it doesn't have to be work related. It doesn't
yep,
have to be that kind of thing. But if I'm productive in making a blanket, if I'm productive in drawing or like or working out, like you said, like that helps me to like blow off the steam.
yeah,
But because if I don't and I just try to be like, I'm gonna meditate all day, at nighttime my brain is like so I
yeah,
definitely understand that.
yeah. I relate to that 100%.
But now you have your toddler, so your toddler also can run you up and down because those that's an age right there. Like I'm good enough to get up and walk around, but also I'm very emotional and I don't know what I'm talking about. Also, I think I know what I'm talking about. So like figure it out for me. That's a lot of
Yeah,
mental work right
it's
there.
it's a lot of hard feelings and hard opinions and big feelings right now. But yeah, I mean that's the good part, is like she exhausts me by the end of the day, so I don't have to, lay in
Yeah.
bed thinking of all the things. I just crash.
Yeah. Well, I thank you for your time. I appreciate this conversation. I hope it was good for you because it was very good for me. And of course, we'll post all the things of like how to reach you. And of course, if there's anything else you want us to share, let us know. But I appreciate you. I appreciate your time and your
Oh,
energy. And also, do you have an Instagram so we can look at you play the guitar?
my personal Instagram, I'm extremely inactive on. So
Okay.
it's really just like I just use Instagram now to follow other people, to be honest.
I
But
get it.
you can connect, of course. Point of Pride is on Instagram and all the
Hmm.
socials. I'm sure you'll post the links. But uh, yeah, honestly, such a great conversation, and thank you for inviting me. It was really a pleasure to get into it a little bit.
Of
And
course.
especially
Thank
given
you.
this political climate, it just feels nice to let your hair down with another queer person that like just gets it and talk about some of that nuance. So thank you.
Yes. And we could always have further conversations in the future.
I would love that. Yeah.